I would like to read a statement to begin our study today. In fact, I would read two statements which I would like to put side by side in our minds so that we can see the connection between both of them. The first one that I would read is taken from Spirit of Prophecy Selections, Volume Book 1, page 290, and it says, "The sanctuary is like a hub of the wheel into which fits every spoke, which connects it to the rim to make locomotion possible. Thus does every doctrine of the Bible radiate from within the sacred precincts of the sanctuary." That's selected, or Spirit of Prophecy Selections, Book 1, page 290. Now I will read another one here, which goes like this, and it is taken from My Life Today, page 26. And this is regarding the incarnation or the nature of Christ. And I will read another one also from volume 5 of Bible Commentary on page 1126. But I would read the one on My Life Today first. It says, concerning the incarnation or the mystery of God, it says, "A knowledge of this mystery furnishes a key to every other. It opens to the soul the treasures of the universe, the possibilities of infinite development." Now I want you to notice that. A knowledge of this mystery, the mystery of the incarnation, the mystery of Christ, furnishes the key to every other. And Bible Commentary, page 1126 says, this truth, the incarnation or the nature of Christ, this truth, infinitely mysterious in itself, explains other mysterious and otherwise unexplainable truths. Now let us put these statements together. The first one that I read from Spirit of Prophecy Selections says, "The sanctuary is like a hub of the wheel into which it fits every spoke, which connects it to the rim to make locomotion possible. Thus does every doctrine of the Bible radiate from within the sacred precincts of the sanctuary." Every doctrine. So now every doctrine radiates or should be understood in light of the sanctuary truth. On the other hand, read that every other mystery or every other doctrine must be understood in light of the incarnation. Now this tells me that the incarnation and the sanctuary are one and the same thing. In other words, the sanctuary doctrine is simply another way to understand the incarnation. The incarnation is taught through the sanctuary. The sanctuary is like an object lesson of what the incarnation is. So now this is why we find that the cleansing of the sanctuary is such an important thing. Now, what is the sanctuary? First of all, we'll find in Exodus chapter 25, when the children of Israel were coming out of Egypt after they spent 215 years in slavery. And I say 215 years because that was the actual number of years that they spent in Egypt. The other 215 years, which make up the 430 years that were prophesied regarding their bondage. The 215 years before that was from the time when Abraham was called, to the time when the children of Israel went into Egypt, to the time when Jacob went into Egypt, was 215 years, and it was from that point the rest of the balance, I should say, of the 430 years began to be reckoned, and that was 250 years in all, 15 years in all. But in Exodus chapter 25, we find that after they were liberated from Egyptian bondage, God gave Moses, while he was in the wilderness, special instructions, and he told him in chapter 8, "And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them." Now this sanctuary that God told Moses that he should make, or the children of Israel should make, so that he can dwell among them. Notice that carefully. The reason for the sanctuary was that God should dwell among them. And the sanctuary being an object lesson of what Christ is. It means, therefore, it was pointing to the Savior who himself would have become that sanctuary. It pointed to the Savior who would have dwelt among them also. So this is what we find in John chapter 1. In John chapter 1 and verse 14 there. It says on verse 14 in John chapter 1, it says, "And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld the glory as the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth." And in another place we are told, and that is found in Desire of Ages, and I think it's on page 23, we are told that it reads in the Revised Version, the Revised Standard Version, it reads, "And the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us." In other words, Jesus Christ became the sanctuary. Jesus Christ became the sanctuary, of which the sanctuary that God gave to ancient Israel was just an object lesson. Now, it was not just an object lesson for the incarnation in terms of who Jesus Christ would have been as the real sanctuary, as a fleshly person in whom God would have tabernacled. The sanctuary was supposed to be a constant reminder to the children of Israel that just as how God's glory was dwelling in that tabernacle, so it is that it was his purpose, his eternal purpose, that his glory should dwell in the tabernacle of the human being. So this is what we find in Desire of Ages, page 161. In Desire of Ages, page 161, concerning the time when Jesus cleansed the sanctuary in the time of ancient Israel, when he came the first time and he chased those who were selling the sheep and the goats and the doves, the turtle doves and so on, in the sanctuary, polluting the sanctuary, polluting the physical sanctuary that was supposed to be an object lesson of what God intended for their bodies. He cleansed that sanctuary, literally drove them out, literally drove them out with a cord. He was there in person and he did it. He ran them out and he cleansed that sanctuary as an object lesson also of what he intends to do with our body temples, our body tabernacles, our body sanctuaries. Now, in the Bible, there are several terms which are used for the sanctuary. You find temple, house, tabernacle, sanctuary. All those words are synonymous. So we find here in Desire of Ages, page 161, we are told in the cleansing of the sanctuary, Jesus was announcing his mission as the Messiah and entering upon his work. That temple erected for the abode of the divine presence was designed to be an object lesson for Israel and for the world. From eternal ages, it was God's purpose that every created being, from the bright and holy seraph to man, should be a temple for the indwelling of the Creator. Because of sin, humanity ceased to be a temple for God. Darkened and defiled by evil, the heart of man no longer revealed the glory of the Divine One. But in the incarnation of the Son of God, in the incarnation of the Son of God, I repeat, the purpose of heaven is fulfilled. God dwells in humanity, not in the sanctuary, the physical sanctuary now. And through saving grace, the heart of man becomes again his temple. Now, this is what the gospel is all about. And this is what the sanctuary service describes of what the gospel is supposed to accomplish in the heart of man. To make man a living temple, a living sanctuary, just as sure it was that the physical sanctuary was a dwelling place for the glory of God. Now, the children of Israel failed to understand and learn this lesson in the purpose, the eternal purpose in God's giving them that sanctuary. So we find in Jeremiah chapter 7, and verse 1, we are told that the children of Israel reached to the point where they boasted so much about the sanctuary, they had lost the meaning of the sanctuary. They failed to understand that the reason that God gave them the sanctuary was that it's not that they should just look upon the sanctuary as something that they should admire and end up worshiping it, but it should be a constant reminder that just as how His glory, just as how God was dwelling in that sanctuary, it was His eternal purpose that they too should become individual sanctuaries as members of the house of God. And it says here concerning their backslidden condition, concerning the way in which they forgot, they lost the purpose of the sanctuary. It says in Jeremiah chapter 7, stand ye in the gate, God talking to Jeremiah, to tell them of this foolishness that they found themselves in, to tell them about their backslidden condition, to tell them how they had lost their purpose, their direction as the people of God. It says, stand in the gate of the Lord's house and proclaim there this word and say, hear the word of the Lord, all ye of Judah, and enter in at these gates to worship the Lord. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, amend your ways and your doings, and I will cause you to dwell in this place. Trust ye not in lying words, saying, the temple of the Lord are these. For if ye truly amend your ways and your doings, if ye truly execute judgment between a man and his neighbor, if ye oppress not the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, and shed not innocent blood in this place, neither walk after other gods to your hurt, then I will cause you to dwell in this place, in the land that I gave to your fathers forever and ever. Behold, ye trust in lying words that cannot profit. Will ye steal, murder, commit adultery, and swear falsely, and burn incense unto Baal, and walk after other gods whom ye know not, and come and stand before me in this house, which is called by my name, and say, we are delivered to do these abominations? Is this house which is called by my name become a den of robbers in your eyes? Behold, I have seen it, saith the Lord. So the children of Israel, they were committing all these abominations, adultery, lying, cheating, robbing the widows, stealing, swearing falsely, offering incense to Baal, and all these abominations they were committing, and they were saying, the temple of the Lord are these. They worshiped the structure. They came to the point where they lost the essence of what the sanctuary was, and they began worshiping the sanctuary itself. So you find in John chapter 2, the children of Israel had lost this purpose to such an extent. For hundreds of years, God had been trying to teach them and to tell them what the meaning of His giving Moses this sanctuary was all about. And they just could not learn that lesson. So what would God do? What did He do? Well, you find there in John chapter 1 and verse 14, it says, and the Word became flesh, and He tabernacled among men. So they had no excuse now. So they didn't have a physical sanctuary now. Now they have a literal body sanctuary, so that just as how when they looked upon the ancient sanctuary, that physical structure, and they saw the glory of God, the Word says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among them, and they beheld His glory. Now you know that when He drove them out of the sanctuary, we are told that He was glorified. Divinity flashed through humanity. They did behold His glory. And they had no excuse. They had a person now who was the antitype of what the sanctuary in type symbolized. They had the real thing, So that when they looked upon this person, they would have seen what would have been God's purpose for the human race. When they looked upon Christ, they saw God dwelling in him. They saw his glory flash through humanity, and they saw it. They had no excuse. But still, the children of Israel did not appreciate what God did. Christ walked among them for 3.5 years in his public ministry. He was born in a manger for 30 years. And for the last 3.5 years, when he began his ministry in AD 27, he walked among them in the flesh as this living temple. And they still did not appreciate it. They still did not learn God's eternal purpose for them in the sanctuary, although he sent one in the flesh. So what God said, he's going to destroy the physical temple. And he did destroy the physical temple. And Christ even told them in John chapter 2, he made a statement there just to show you how the children of Israel did not understand God's eternal purpose for them. When Christ said in John chapter 2, and you can read it there, in John chapter 2 and verse 19, it says there, let us read it. John chapter 2 and verse 19 through 21. Jesus answered and said unto them, destroy this temple. In fact, I should read from verse 18, the question which they asked. Then answered the Jews and said unto him, what sign shewest thou unto us, seeing that thou doest these things? What sign? What is the sign will you show to us that you are indeed the Messiah? And he said, Jesus answered and said unto them, verse 19, destroy this temple now. He was standing in Solomon's porch, remember. He was standing right in front of the physical temple. And he said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. And what do you think? The children of Israel demonstrated their ignorance, demonstrated their lack of understanding, which they had demonstrated way back in the time of Jeremiah when they said the temple of the Lord are these. So when Jesus said, destroy this temple and in 3 days I will raise it up, they thought he was talking about the very temple that they were worshipping and took so much pride in. And verse 20 says, then said the Jews, 46 years was this temple in building, and wilt thou rear it up in 3 days? But he spake of the temple of his body. He was speaking about the sanctuary of his body. But they were thinking that he was talking about Solomon's temple. They were thinking that he was trying to destroy their organization. See? Now this has always been the problem with the church throughout the ages. Whenever someone comes with a spiritual message that tries to show them the essence of what the gospel is, that tries to show them that what the essence of what the sanctuary truth is, they think that you are trying to destroy their organization. So they said, here he goes now. He's going to destroy our nation. And this is what you find in the book of John, where it said it is in the time of Caiaphas there. It was necessary that one man should die, or else, if he doesn't, he's going to destroy the nation, our nation. The Romans will come and they will take our place, and they will take our nation, and they will destroy our temple. So we have to get rid of this guy. And they did. They crucified him. And this has always been the response to church leaders. This has always been the response to religious bigots whenever there is a message of present truth. To destroy the ones who are bearing the truth, because they think that that one is trying to tear down their organization. They have come to the point where they worship and they have more belief in the organizational setup than in what the organization stands for. And that was the history of the Jews. So when we are talking about the cleansing of the sanctuary, then we are talking about the cleansing of the defilement of the human body. We are not talking about the cleansing of the physical structure. We are talking about the cleansing of the defilement of the physical body of the individual, of which the physical structure of the sanctuary was only a type. So when the Jews, for example, were selling the sheep and the goats and the lambs and the turtle doves and all the different animals in the sanctuary, what Christ was really telling them was, look, the same way how you are outwardly polluting the sanctuary, it is just so you are inwardly polluting your body sanctuary, in which I want to dwell. And the lesson that he taught them was that I'm going to cleanse it. And that was pointing down to the time, in our time, when Christ would come and he would cleanse the sanctuary. Not the physical sanctuary. He will not go in a church and simply throw out all the pews and throw out all the carpet and throw out all the different things that we find in churches and say, well, I don't like that and so on. He will come to physically cleanse the body temples of his people. And this is what we want to study today, the cleansing of a sanctuary. Now, the SDA doctrine in Daniel chapter 8 and verse 14, this is the bedrock. This is the foundation of the SDA movement. And it says there in Daniel chapter 8 and verse 14. Let us read that. In Daniel chapter 8 and verse 14, this is the doctrine upon which the Christian religion, I should say, is based. This is upon the doctrine upon which the SDA denomination was raised up by God in 1844. And this was Daniel here, who was told this by the angel Gabriel himself. And it says there in Daniel chapter 8 and verse 14, and he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Now, this was not talking about the physical sanctuary to be cleansed, because at the time when Daniel was given this vision and this explanation, the physical temple was in ruins. Babylon had destroyed it. Nebuchadnezzar had burnt it to the ground. So there was no sanctuary to be cleansed at that time. So Daniel was in a quandary. What was he talking about? Now, we know that this 2,300 days prophecy relates to the time when the investigative judgment would have begun in 1844. So from 457 BC down to 1844 was the period that this 2,300 days covered. However, the Jews were allotted 490 years of this 2,300 days or years. The Jews were allotted 490 years of that. And I want you to take special note as to what the Jews were supposed to accomplish during those 490 years that were allotted to them. Israel was given a specific time period in which they were supposed to cleanse the sanctuary. They were given a specific period within that 2,300 years in which they were supposed to make right, in which they were supposed to come to an understanding of what the physical temple meant to them. So we find that in Daniel chapter 9. In Daniel chapter 9, Gabriel came back to give Daniel the explanation. And Daniel was praying. You remember he was in verse 20 of Daniel chapter 9, it said, and whilst I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sins of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of my God, yea, whilst I was speaking and praying in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplications, the commandment came forth, and I came, and I am come to shew thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, to finish transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So now notice carefully what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to make an end of sins. They were supposed to stop polluting the sanctuary. They were supposed to stop polluting their body temples. They were supposed to finish transgression. They were supposed to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision. Now, when you do that, if they had done that, they would have been sealed. This is what the Bible tells you here. The vision would have been sealed up. Yes, they were supposed to bring in everlasting righteousness and seal up the vision and prophecy. Now, that which pertained to ancient Israel in terms of the time period that was allotted to them to make an end of sins, to finish transgression and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to seal up the vision and prophecy, that which was given to them in the type in their day is that which will be given to us in our day also. So it will be said of us at the time when the sanctuary is supposed to be cleansed, we too must come to the realization that we too must make an end of sins, finish transgression, make reconciliation for iniquity, and bring in everlasting righteousness. Now, everlasting righteousness is not righteousness that comes in today and ends tomorrow. Everlasting righteousness is righteousness that comes in to stay forever. In other words, we must stop sinning. We must reach the point where we become like Jesus himself, where we are no longer sinning, where we no longer commit one wrong act. And when we do that, it tells us he will seal up the vision. The vision of the 2300 days will be sealed up. In other words, we will have a people who will receive the seal of the living God in their foreheads. Now, that's the first phase of the cleansing of the sanctuary, where the individual comes to the realization that it is time to do away with sin. Now, in our day, the time when we should finish transgression is brought to view in the book of Revelation, in Revelation chapter 10 and verse 7 there. It tells us the same thing that the children of Israel were supposed to do is what we are supposed to do. It says there, but in the days, I should read from verse 6, really, and swear by him. This was the angel that stood with 1 foot in the sea and 1 foot on land, and swear by him that liveth forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that therein are, and the earth and the things that therein are, and the sea and the things which are therein, that there should be time no longer. There should be time no longer. The time came for Israel in their day when there was time no longer. They were given 490 years. And when that period of time was expired, my friend, it was said of them, there was time no longer. The children of Israel, they lost out. There was time no longer. And so it is in our day. The same period of time will be given to us. And it will be said, there will be time no longer for us to be given to cleanse that sanctuary, to make an end of sin, to bring in everlasting righteousness. That time will be very short when it will be said, my friend, there will be time no longer. And what time is he talking about? But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he hath declared by his servants the prophets. Now remember, we said that the mystery of God is the same as the incarnation. The mystery of God is that which is demonstrated in the sanctuary service. The mystery of God is that which we are supposed to come to understand and to finish that mystery of God in our lives. Jesus Christ was the mystery of God. He was God incarnate. How it is that the God of heaven can take the form of a human being and dwell in it. Now, this is what we are supposed to become. We are supposed to become the tabernacles of God himself. We are supposed to finish that mystery. And this is the mystery the Bible tells us, according to Romans chapter 16 and verse 25 there, that has been hid in silence all throughout these ages. This is a mystery that Ephesians chapter 3 and 11 tells us there is the eternal purpose of God. This is a mystery that we are told in Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 6 is the mystery of God, the mystery of the gospel. This is a mystery, my friend, that we are supposed to finish. We are supposed to finish transgression. We are supposed to make an end of sins, and we are supposed to bring in everlasting righteousness, and God will acknowledge that we have done so by sealing up the vision and sealing a group of people upon whom or in whom the mystery of God will be finished. And A.T. Jones in his book, Lessons on Faith, tells us that, and I will read it. It says, what is the mystery of God? What is this mystery of God? God in the flesh. In these days, that mystery is to be finished in 144,000 people. There will be a sealed people in whom the mystery of God will be finished. There will be a people in whom the sanctuary would have been cleansed to the extent where God's glory can now dwell in them. There will be a people 144,000 strong who will be just like Jesus and who will finish this mystery. And just as how it was said of Christ, and they beheld his glory. When these 144,000 finish that mystery, it will be said of them also, according to Isaiah chapter 66 and verse 18 and 19, it says there, and they shall declare my glory among the Gentiles. I tell you, we are coming to the time when this sanctuary will be cleansed, and those who fail to cleanse that sanctuary, the Bible tells us they will be destroyed from among God's people. So in 1844, the sanctuary began to be cleansed in heaven. The books began to be cleansed in heaven because the people were dead. Ecclesiastes chapter 9 and verse 9 tells us that the dead know not anything. The judgment of the dead began in 1844 with the cleansing of the physical temple or sanctuary in heaven in which all the sins of the people were stored. However, when the cleansing of the sanctuary begins for the living people, it will not only be a bookwork, it will also be a physical body job that God will perform among his people, so that whatsoever things are bound in heaven in the books will also be bound on earth in the bodies of his people. It will be a physical body job. And just as how Christ was physically present when he cleansed the physical temple in the time of ancient Israel, and he drove them out of the sanctuary, he will be physically present to cleanse our body temples when he comes suddenly to his temple on earth. Now, I hope you get that picture. So now when we're talking about the cleansing of the sanctuary, my friend, this is not something that will be happening and you will not know it. This, when it comes for the living, this will be something that will be real, it will be personal, it will be where the rubber meets the road. And just as God gave the children of Israel 490 years to finish transgression and to make an end of sins, so too has he given Seventh-day Adventists, so too has he given the Protestant nations 490 years to finish transgression, to make an end of sin, and to bring in everlasting righteousness. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church is right on the verge of that 490-year period that began in 1504 when Luther found the Bible and the Protestant Reformation began. The Seventh-day Adventist Church was the last that was raised up in 1844 to finish that work and to come to the point as we are right now, where that 490-year period, just as it was in the time of ancient Israel, is about to end. Just at the time when there shall be time no longer. And I say, my friend, it is time we realize what God is about to do among his people. I would like to bring to your attention now exactly how this sanctuary will be cleansed in our day. Now we know that the judgment for the dead, or the cleansing of the sanctuary in heaven, began in 1844. But we also know that we are told in Great Controversy, page 483, we are told concerning the time when that judgment begins for the living. It contrasts what took place at the time when the judgment began for the dead. And in commenting on that, the servant of the Lord tells us, when the judgment began in 1844, she says, the lives of all who have believed on Jesus, page 483, great controversy, pass in solemn review before God. Beginning with those who first lived upon the earth, our advocate examines the cases of each successive generation and closes with the living. So we know in 1844, that review, that grand review, that tribunal, when the lives of all who professed the name of Christ passed in solemn review, or began to be passed in solemn review before God, that has been going on for 150 years now. 3 jubilees. That has been going on. But we are told here, beginning with those who first lived upon the earth. In other words, the judgment of the dead began with Abel, the first dead person. It began with righteous Abel. Our advocate examines the cases of each successive generation and closes with the living. Every name is mentioned. Every case closely investigated. Names are accepted. Names are rejected. From age to age, all who have truly repented of sin and by faith claimed the blood of Christ as the atoning sacrifice have had pardon written against their names in the books of heaven. And in the closing work of judgment, their sins. Now, notice this, and this is the part which I want you to understand. In the closing work, notice carefully what takes place in the closing work. In the closing work, it says of the judgment, their sins are blotted out. Notice that term. Blotted out. Their sins are blotted out. And they themselves are accounted worthy of eternal life. Now, there is a very, 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 very important difference, or I should say a very important distinction between the blotting out of sin and the forgiveness of sin. While Adam was forgiven of his sin 6,000 years ago, his sin was not blotted out until the judgment began in 1844. The blotting out of sin and the forgiveness of sin are two mutually exclusive transactions. They are not the same. Similarly, when you as a living person commit a wrong act, we are told, I can read it here for you in Patriarchs and Prophets, page 354, it says, the most important part of the daily ministration was the service performed in behalf of individuals. The repentant sinner brought his offering to the door of the tabernacle and placing his hand on the victim's head, confessed his sin. Thus in figure, transferring them from himself to the innocent sacrifice. By his own hand, the animal was slain and the blood was carried by the priest into the holy place and sprinkled before the veil, behind which was the ark containing the law that the sinner had transgressed. By this ceremony, the sin was through the blood transferred in figure to the sanctuary. In figure to the sanctuary.
And grips the solid rock.